The Essex Air Ambulance is one of the busiest in the country.
And all next week, Anglia News will be out and about with a helicopter and paramedics to see exactly how they operate. Timothy Evans has more.
Yes, each day next week we'll be with the Essex Air Ambulance, meeting some of the paramedics, meeting perhaps some of the patients that it helps, and finding out just why this is one of the busiest air ambulances in the country. It's been around for 4 years, supported from the start by public donations. It's had different colours and different crews, but its function is still the same.
It's used like any other ambulance, so it can be used for someone that's broken their arm on the dingy marshes that needs to get to Broomfield. It can be used for road accidents on the busy roads that we have in Essex, the M11 and M25. It can be used for any type of job.
The helicopter is based at Boreham Airfield near Chelmsford in the geographical centre of Essex. It's control room operators a few miles away at Broomfield who decide when it's needed. It may be when time is critical or when the alternative is a lengthy journey by road. So join me each day next week on Anglia News going behind the scenes with the Essex Air Ambulance.
You know, over the past few years, the sight of an air ambulance has become one we're used to seeing whenever there's a major emergency.
The Essex Air Ambulance is one of the busiest in the country, and Anglia News is flying with it all this week to get an insight into the paramedics' life-saving work. Our reporter Timothy Evans has the first of the nightly updates from our Essex News Centre. Tim.
Well, Richard, it looked as though it was going to be a quiet start to the week, but it certainly didn't stay that way. The Air Ambulance went out on 2 missions today, both with the result of 999 calls, and they were typical in many ways of the sort of operations that the Air Ambulance carries out. More often than not, the team take off from their base at Boreham, just a few miles from here, and they have very little idea exactly where they'll be landing and exactly what sort of emergency they'll be facing.
There you go.
Monday morning had been dragging, but before lunch all that changed. Time for the first emergency of the day.
It's a 50-year-old female falling down a flight of stairs with a head injury.
The Essex Air Ambulance took off from its base at Boreham. The casualty was a teacher who'd fallen at a school in Billericay. She had broken bones and head injuries. The head teacher watched as the helicopter came in.
I was not expecting it, certainly. I was actually teaching at the time, and I'm full of admiration for the ambulance service, full stop, but the air ambulance came in. I mean, it's not a very big field that he landed on, and excellent job.
The injured teacher was reluctant to be filmed. Thankfully, her injuries were less serious than first thought. For the crew, time to reflect on the first mission of the week.
It was okay, you know, it was a fairly standard, easy job. In quick, rotors running, patient on board, out quick, and off to the hospital, which again only took us about 3 minutes to get to the hospital. So it's a very quick rotational job, really.
Soon the air ambulance was on its way to another call. The helicopter circled the scene of a road accident at Sandon near Chelmsford. The priority was to find a safe place to land. The road was blocked by an overturned van. Police, firefighters and ambulance workers were on the scene. Amazingly, the 2 occupants of the van had walked away from it. The vehicle had suddenly gone out of control.
I was driving down this road, down towards Chelmsford, and steering went, and all I saw was a tree coming. So, and that's where we are now. So,
what's happened to your head?
I don't know. I think she's a bit sore, but I think it's just a cut. Nothing major.
I mean, luckily for the 2 occupants, they've come out of it with very minor cuts, bumps and bruises. So what they're going to do now, they're not going to go up by, obviously, air ambulance. They're going to travel up to Broomfield Hospital for a check over.
The Essex Air Ambulance prepares to leave the farmer's field where it landed. It's back in the air, back on call, back ready and waiting for the next emergency. Let me just tell you a bit about the crewing arrangements of the air ambulance. The helicopter is flown by a pilot. On board there are 2 paramedics. One sits in the back and tends to the patient. The other sits by the pilot and either helps with the navigation or turns around and helps to treat the patient. Now we'll have a look inside the helicopter tomorrow and you'll be able to see just how tight that space is. We'll also be looking at how the helicopter is financed. It's not actually from NHS budgets, it's from private contributions. So we'll also be following the emergencies as they come in, so please join me tomorrow for that.
Thank you, Tim. He's in for an exciting week. Yeah. More on the air ambulance tomorrow.
All this week, Anglia News cameras are following the work of the paramedics on board the Essex Air Ambulance.
Today started like any other day, but just as the helicopter landed at a fundraising effort, it was called away to deal with a serious accident on the M11. Well, our reporter Timothy Evans joins us now from the Air Ambulance base at Boreham. What can you tell us, Tim?
Well, yesterday we were saying, Claire, it's something of a quiet start to the week. Today it's certainly been busy and quite traumatic as well. This, of course, is the Essex Air Ambulance, and today it's been involved in two major missions. Now, the first was at a fairly isolated spot, which would have been quite difficult to reach in a conventional vehicle. The second on the M11 proved extremely challenging for the pilot and paramedics, challenging professionally and also emotionally and mentally as well, as they set about treating a young worker on a road construction site who'd suffered extremely serious injuries. Now, the day started with a phone call. Tuesday morning. It's not yet 9 o'clock, but already the Essex Air Ambulance is needed. The paramedics take the details. Meanwhile, the pilot is preparing the helicopter. With everyone aboard, it takes off. Its destination is Boxstead, where a vineyard worker has suffered serious injuries. The team survey the scene from the air and assess where to land. The 19-year-old worker was riding a quad bike and failed to see a rope stretched across his path. It caught him under the chin, which resulted in neck injuries. The fall resulted in back injuries. The team treat him at the scene before returning to the helicopter. The journey to Colchester would normally take a quarter of an hour by road. It's just 3 minutes by air. During the flight, the paramedics constantly check he's all right. At Colchester, an accident and emergency team is waiting. They quickly take the patient onto a trolley for the short journey from the helipad to the casualty unit. Inside, specialists hear from the paramedics how they found the patient and what treatment they provided. The priority for the paramedics is always to reach hospital in the shortest possible time.
We dressed his wounds quickly because there was some significant bleeding there. We mobilised his spine in case there was a spine injury, give immediate oxygen to try and boost the body's oxygen levels, and then it's really rapid transportation to A&E so the surgical team can do their bit.
The paramedics see the young man's family and are able to give them reassurance.
Got him in fairly quick, which is
The next stop is Saffron Walden, not for an emergency, but to promote local fundraising efforts to finance the air ambulance. As soon as it lands, though, local organisers are told the helicopter is needed urgently for an incident on the M11. It takes off immediately. The helicopter lands on the motorway. Traffic in both directions is halted, so too are flights in and out of nearby Stansted Airport. An accident has taken place in the roadworks involving the construction of new slip roads. A drilling machine working on a new embankment has caught a worker by his clothes, trapping him. He has serious injuries to his arm and head. Firefighters and paramedics work to release him without aggravating the injuries. There's an awful moment when the machine turns again and the rescuers are back to square one. Paramedic Clive Parnham stays close to the worker, a young man in his 20s. Paramedic Darren Deakin prepares vital equipment, and pilot Steve Wrightson checks to make sure the helicopter has clearance to make a speedy getaway. Minutes tick by. The aim is always to try to take seriously injured patients to hospital within 1 hour, the so-called golden hour. The helicopter takes off within 50 minutes of the incident. It's a race against time to get the patient into an operating theatre.
Flight time from the incident to hospital was 4 minutes. So, there was a trauma team waiting at Harlow Hospital, which again, hastened the movement of the patient in for treatment.
It took us a while longer than we would have liked to free him from the machine. But all the time he was in there, we were just reassuring him that everything was going to be okay. Keep him warm, keep him covered as much as possible.
The ambulance service is aware that its paramedics carry out a vital but stressful job.
It's not so much now that the problem arises. As we all know, we've all done the horrific jobs. It's in 2 days' time.
There's always going to be problems with a job like that. It's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? We did what we could at the time. That's all you can do, isn't it, really?
The helicopter is being refuelled. It's impossible to say where or when its next mission might be. Those injuries on the M11 certainly look serious, but we can find out now how that young patient is getting along. With me is Lee Gillam from Essex Ambulance Service. Lee, how is the young man from the M11?
At the present moment in time, he's holding his own. At 4:15, when we actually phoned Princess Alexandra Hospital, he was in theatres. They were fixing the major trauma to both arms and to the head wound that he had. And as we believe at the present moment in time, his injuries are not life-threatening. Although they're serious, they're not life-threatening, and he may make a good recovery probably in 6 months' time.
The team behind you did a great job today.
What can we say about these boys? No difference to our land guys out there, but they are absolutely, tremendous. The work that they did, as you was there yourself, you saw certain aspects of it. Really fabulous job that they all did. They pulled the stops out for this young man.
They're getting ready for tomorrow. It's important to keep the helicopter in readiness all the time.
This needs to be readiness for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so that a call comes in 8, we are straight off. We're just flying, and that's the whole idea.
And it just shows the value of the helicopter today.
Speed, along with these guys, crucial, absolutely crucial.
Lee, thank you very much. That's it from Boreham, from the Essex Ambulance Airbase. We'll be back with the Air Ambulance tomorrow on Anglia News.
Thank you, Tim. If we get that call at 8 o'clock, we'll be there. Now, all this week we've been following the work of the Essex Air Ambulance.
So what's been happening on day 3? Timothy Evans has tonight's update from our Essex News Centre. Tim.
It's been another busy day, Karen. So far this week, we've already travelled more than 300 miles with the Air Ambulance. In the 4 years it's been flying, the helicopter has attended more than 2,500 emergencies, and that number keeps on growing. Wednesday morning, and the Essex Air Ambulance is called to an accident on the A12 at Hatfield Peveril near Chelmsford. In fact, though, no one has been hurt and the helicopter is not required. It's not long before there's a call to a more serious emergency, this time on the M25 near Brentwood. The helicopter circles the scene of a collision between a lorry and a car. 3 people have been injured. The most serious casualty, who suffered possible neck injuries, is airlifted to hospital at Harlow. In a gap between emergencies, the pilot Bob Brett showed me just how manoeuvrable the helicopter is. It's actually a Messerschmitt, designed originally for the German army. It's capable of turning and altering height at speed. A crowd is waiting to greet the air ambulance at Harwich. A short time earlier, it was taking a patient with chest pains to hospital. The patient's condition was too serious to be filmed. This is a more happy occasion. The helicopter is thanking 2 workers from Wilkins Jam at Tiptree. Their sponsored walk along the Essex Way has raised more than £5,000 for the air ambulance appeal. Before the helicopter leaves, there's just time for local school children to take a look around. And so another day is nearly over. Not as dramatic as yesterday, but just as busy. Let me just update you about an incident we featured yesterday. A road worker was airlifted to hospital with serious arm injuries following an accident involving a drilling machine on the M11. Now, there were fears he may lose one or both arms, but so far, so good. Tomorrow he'll be taken to Broomfield Hospital for microsurgery.
The introduction of air ambulances in recent years has brought a revolution in the way that paramedics can reach emergency cases. In our region, there's the East Anglian Air Ambulance for Suffolk, Norfolk and Cambridgeshire, and in the south, the Essex Air Ambulance. Both rely on voluntary fundraising to stay in the air. And all this week, we're flying with the Essex team to see the vital work that they do. Our reporter Timothy Evans has been with the paramedics again. Tim.
Richard, the team here tonight preparing the helicopter for tomorrow. Tonight we take a look at the fundraising which keeps this helicopter flying. It costs about £60,000 a month to maintain the air ambulance, and all that money comes from the people of Essex. They obviously feel it's worthwhile paying for this helicopter. Call sign Helimed 7.
Helimed 7, Helimed 7. Get record for you, please, at the monument.
Thursday morning, and the ambulance control centre at Broomfield is calling through to the helicopter base at Boreham, a few miles away. Already the pilot is preparing the aircraft while the paramedics take details of the emergency.
Cheers, thanks a lot.
A motorcyclist has been injured in the north of the county. But while the helicopter is in flight, they hear word that the injuries are not serious. The air ambulance is not needed. Its home is a former American bomber base on the outskirts of Chelmsford. The air ambulance is very much smaller than the wartime planes which used to be here. To demonstrate just how much room there is in the helicopter, I'm playing the part of the patient. Paramedics Clive Parnham and Neil Peachy and operations manager Lee Gillam are on duty today. They load the stretcher, as is normally the case, through the rear of the helicopter. Clive, there's a lot of space here, but what's the equipment you've got on the helicopter?
Well, basically, it's the same sort of equipment we would carry on a land ambulance, have a defibrillator, a suction unit, and oxygen therapy equipment, pain-relieving gas, drug case, and fluids.
The helicopter makes an impressive arrival at Audley End near Saffron Walden. The aim of the visit is to promote local fundraising efforts to support the air ambulance. It's financed entirely on a charitable basis. The cost is around £60,000 a month.
I think people see it as a charity that actually they may well need at any time, or their friends and family may need. So it is one that actually people are more willing and happy to actually support.
The helicopter is here for the time being. It could be called away at any moment.
When somebody needs it, it'll go immediately. So we always said to people, for today, we'll have it there if we can, but please accept it may not necessarily be here.
It's accepted the service is expensive, but it saves lives, and there's no price anyone can put on that. Timothy Evans, Anglia News, with the Essex Air Ambulance. And the helicopter is now in its 4th year of saving lives. This is just one person who was helped, a 1-week-old baby who was flown unconscious to Colchester, and his parents say the flight to Colchester Hospital saved his life. They also say, as a small token of our thanks, we recently held a coffee morning and raised £300 for your funds. That's typical of the sort of money that comes in day out to keep this helicopter in the air.
All this week we've been with the Essex Air Ambulance. Anglia News reporter Timothy Evans has been with the paramedics each day, and we can join him now. Tim.
Well, Richard, the Air Ambulance team told us that Friday is usually quite hectic for them. Today, that was certainly the case. Friday morning, and the helicopter rotors are already turning. The paramedics don't know it, but there's a busy day ahead of them. They go off to assist someone who's fallen at home, someone else who's suffered back injuries, but neither requires an immediate airlift to hospital. They land at Colchester Hospital with someone who does. They brought in a middle-aged woman who's lapsed into a diabetic coma at her home in North Essex. It's a potentially serious condition which requires rapid treatment. She's taken straight from the helipad into the accident and emergency department. The hospital team value the work of the air ambulance. This woman is already coming out of the coma as a result of the treatment provided by the paramedics.
Quite convinced from watching the function of the helicopter over the years that it's certainly provided very good response times to these disparate geographical areas.
Another call comes into the airbase at Boreham, but it's quickly clear the emergency is not as severe as first thought.
Cancel guys, stand down.
The team is asked to take a patient into Broomfield from Harlow Hospital. It's the construction worker who was seriously injured in an accident with a drilling machine on the M11 on Tuesday. He faces a long period of treatment involving microsurgery and skin grafts. The paramedics are pleased to see him again.
We lose touch with a lot of patients, so it is nice from that point of view to see the start of the job and transfer to hopefully what will be his final stay in hospital. He's doing well, and he seems quite bright considering what he's been through.
This patient's recovery has certainly been greatly helped by the air ambulance. There are plans to swap this helicopter for a bigger model. That's dependent on fundraising, but organisers say, given the previous generosity of the people of Essex, the sky's the limit. I've spent a week now with the Essex Air Ambulance, and it's hard not to be impressed with the way they operate and the work that they do. Let's just remind ourselves what's happened this week. Now, it started with a potentially serious road crash. Amazingly, van driver and passenger here had only minor injuries. This was a young quad bike rider caught by a wire under his neck. He's now out of hospital. The construction worker injured by a drill faces a long stay in hospital. Hopefully, his arms have been saved. An accident on the M25 resulted in a call-out midweek. One person airlifted to hospital with whiplash. And a helicopter visited Audley End to promote local fundraising. And today it had airlifted a woman who is in a diabetic coma. She's on the way to recovery too. Within the past hour, the air ambulance has been out again, this time to a road accident near Great Dunmow. Our thanks go to the pilots and paramedics this week, and our good wishes, of course, to all the patients. Back to the studio.
They certainly do. Thank you, Tim. Well, we've been hearing from Tim with his reports on the air ambulance all week.